Let's talk about agoraphobia. Remember in last week's vlog where I said next week we'll be doing part 2 about volcanoes in Costa Rica? Well, surprise! I'm not in Costa Rica anymore. Back at home. I left my family vacation 5 days early from Costa Rica because of my anxiety and agoraphobia. Yes, on social media, you got to see photos like this, and it looked like I was having a fantastic time. And that's the thing, I was having a fantastic time. But when it wasn't great, it felt very uncomfortable, and I was spending my entire vacation in my own head, fearing fear. But let me back up a little bit and give you a little bit of context to this and how we got here. So what is agoraphobia? Agoraphobia is defined as a type of anxiety disorder in which you fear and avoid places or situations that might cause you to panic and make you feel helpless or trapped. Another way to think about it is agoraphobia being at a place in which escaping might feel difficult or embarrassing. Symptoms of that fear can include leaving home alone, crowds and lines, enclosed spaces, open spaces, which I know sounds contradictory, but we will get there. And I've always talked about my fear of flying. I even wrote many pages about fear in my book. Here's the proof. I've written about fear of flying. But what I discovered a few years back is that it didn't have much to do with the actual fear of the airplane or crashing an airplane. It had everything to do with fear of not having control or fearing that lack of escape, or agoraphobia. It's that claustrophobia and that lack of control I felt inside of the plane. The feeling that I couldn't just escape whenever I wanted to, right? We're like in the sky. The same thing was true when it came to long car rides or long trips, or let's say even getting on a boat, for example. I didn't have control of if I could see the shoreline or the destination to where we're going. I didn't have the power to tell the captain hey, I want to go back in, because usually I'd be with other people. As the fear for open spaces goes, I've noticed that I've just never been a giant fan of music festivals, which is hard when you're dating a DJ. It's almost as though I feared too much space with so many people in it, which can sound like the opposite of claustrophobia, like having too much space, but it's that same factor of feeling trapped or like I can't leave easily, and it still sparks that feeling of claustrophobia. I remember maybe 10 years ago when I was 19, so that was actually 12 years ago, whatever, I'm turning 32 this year, it's fine. I noticed once or twice when I was skiing, which is my favorite thing. It's time with my family. I loved the snow and the woods and the feeling of skiing. But I remember on one trip specifically being in the gondola and seeing this vast open vista of mountain and getting this weird feeling, and I never knew how to explain, because I'm like, there's so much fresh air, there's so much space, how could I possibly be feeling claustrophobic? But again, it comes back to that lack of control. To actually get out of the mountains, you have to take a 2-hour car ride down to the main town, and that feeling of not being able to just leave when I want to because I wasn't in control of the trip or I wasn't the one planning the vacation, that sparked that sense of panic inside of me. The same thing happened when I moved to New York City when I was 19. Anyone who knows me knows that I am obsessed with Gossip Girl, and I wanted to be like Serena van der Woodsen so bad. And so moving to New York City was this dream, but I got a double whammy of subways, which made me feel confined and claustrophobic, and then these tall, massive buildings that were swaying over me. I would get that same feeling. I didn't realize how bad this was contributing to my agoraphobia and anxiety, and I ended up moving from New York City because of it. That's how I ended up in LA. I remember in some of my earliest panic attacks as a teenager telling my mom on the way to her driving me to the ER, because I was thinking something was wrong with my heart, that all I could say is something doesn't feel right, something feels off. And I'd say that over and over again, and still to this day, that's exactly the best way that I can describe what agoraphobia feels like, where I'm in this constant fear of having fear, and I don't feel safe not only in my environment, but not in my own body either. So I know what some people might be thinking right now. How could you possibly be agoraphobic? You're so outgoing. You travel all the time. Well, I'm really, really good at masking it. Not even my own family knew how much I was suffering on this trip because I feel like I'm supposed to be this pillar of mental health. After all, I wrote a whole book about it. I'm supposed to be like the expert. And just that fear of vocalizing it, I also didn't want to cement its realness of how badly I was struggling with it. And I can't always pinpoint why or how the feeling is going to pop up. It can pop up in as small of something as like an appointment with a friend to grab coffee. And I fear like I can't get out of that conversation. And what if I start to panic in front of them? And then I spiral into that thought process. Or in as big as a situation as something like we flew and spent thousands of dollars and my mom spent all this money to plan this gorgeous family vacation in Costa Rica. And I ended up spending even more money to fly home 5 days early. Some people might say like, how could you possibly feel this way? You're like on camera and you're a performer. I give speeches in front of like hundreds of people. I travel and make travel vlogs. And I think my answer to that is I actually grew up performing. I was in musical theater. I was in my high school television productions class. I was always on camera, and it sort of became a safer space for me. I feel very safe when performing, and I actually have a lot of control over it too, usually. It's a task that I'm an expert at, and I've been doing it for years. And I'm a pro at knowing that the feelings of excitement can be easily confused with the feelings of anxiety, especially when it comes to public speaking or entertainment work. It kind of feels like I can put on this suit that I can like put it on and take it off. And I find my agoraphobia much more apparent when it is involving spaces or situations that actually have nothing to do with work. So when did this start? Like I've mentioned in a couple examples of maybe like that ski vacation or coffee with a friend, I've always noticed symptoms of agoraphobia, but didn't know the word because I had such a stereotype of what that looked like in my head. I thought, well, I can leave my house, I can be on TV shows, surely I don't have agoraphobia. But that's just not the case. Mental health looks different on everybody. My agoraphobia might not look like yours or maybe what you see on TV. But we can typically trace it back to anxiety disorders, which we all know that I have. Definitely. A few months ago, I went off all my medications to start microdosing fungi. And while I've been documenting that for the last 4 to 5-ish months, and I'm still gonna be posting about that and making a video for that experience, I will say that I did stop microdosing because I felt like I needed to get back on my anti-anxiety meds. I didn't realize it, but when looking at the math, right when I really was off my meds for about 3-ish months, that's when these travel experiences started. I had to go to New York, I had to go to Florida. I was flying a lot, and I did not realize that that was also the time when the meds were fully out of my system for the first time. So it's like I got flooded. And when I went home for Thanksgiving, my mom pointed out that I like never left our house, which I can see why. It's a place of comfort. It's a source of family. I feel really safe there. Even like going to the neighborhood bar that I grew up in, for some reason made me feel very unsettled. And again, I couldn't vocalize what it was. It's just a feeling that I felt. And then I let that feeling take over and I let it become a fact. When in reality, we all know that feelings are not facts. They're just there to communicate information about ourselves. When I feel the feeling of agoraphobia, it feels like my vision almost gets weird, like it becomes differently dimensional, if that makes sense. I start over talking, my energy goes up because I'm trying to mask it. So someone might actually think I'm having like a really great time. My hands get sweaty, and then I just have this internal monologue of like intrusive thoughts screaming at me in the back of my head. And then the Costa Rica trip. So as you can see, that was a lot of flying for one girl with agoraphobia and panic attacks and flying fear and anxiety medication change and trying this new thing, isn't it? It's like, no wonder I felt totally out of whack in Costa Rica. So day 5 of 10 of the vacation, I finally broke down. It was actually Christmas Day, and I had told Jared how bad I felt, and I felt like I had been suffering this whole time more than he was aware of. I came to him and I asked if he would go with me to talk to my mom about it, and we went into this like gorgeous bedroom of this villa that we were staying at in this, 5-star resort area with our own private beach overlooking the jungle. And I had to tell my mom the truth that it had nothing to do with the accommodations or what she had planned, right? Like I could be at the Ritz in Paris or like a cardboard box in Canada. I was gonna feel the same way. It was so important for me to let her know how I felt about that because I felt this overwhelming shame and guilt and embarrassment that they were gonna see it as like I wasn't liking the vacation when that just wasn't the truth. You know, she had spent all this time planning this trip and booking these excursions with the family members, and it was vital that everyone in my family understood that it had nothing to do with them. They couldn't take it personally. That was like kind of where I started to cry because I wanted to stress how much I love them and love spending time with them, and that if I could, I'd put them all in my pocket and take them back to LA with me. Finally, after like an hour of chatting and reminding my mom there was nothing that she could like personally do because she's a fixer and so is Jared kind of, she asked me just like straight up, what would be the best for you? And I told her honestly, if it were up to me, I would go home. And then she told me that you should do what would make you feel best. I cried and I told her I felt like I had to let everyone down and I didn't want people to be disappointed in me or not get it because I myself couldn't even really explain it. But my mom and Jared assured me along the way that no one was gonna feel the way that I was anticipating. And the truth was they were right. I was so fearful about their reaction that I just needed to experience it and see for myself that I was making that all up in my head. I was projecting, right? So I pulled each of them into a room, starting with my sister, and told her the truth that I need to get back to LA and get stable on my meds and like figure out what this is. And she could not have been more loving and supportive about it and encouraging me, just telling me like, yeah, go home. And the same with my dad, who has always been the one that had never had like prolonged mental health issues, and I was always fearful of him like getting it. And he even just gave me like a huge hug and said, Kelsey, I'm your father. If you need to go take care of yourself, go do that. I will never be disappointed in you and I love you. Now, some therapists might tell you what I did was a bit of avoidant behavior. If I were sticking to true exposure therapy, I would have stayed and tried different techniques to stick it out. But I also like to think some therapists would have said the same thing that like some of my friends told me when I had texted them saying like, oh my gosh, I'm actually flying home early. I texted Lauren Riamaki, my friend Steph, who's my co-producer on things, Jasmine, like all of these people that I love and have worked with mental health stuff in this space, and they all said the same thing. They were like, you made it 5 days. You're not going home 5 days. Like, you made it 5 days. You flew to Costa Rica. That's like a huge accomplishment for you. And that is true. Having that support system is so crucial, which brings me to my last point. So what are we gonna do about it? So yes, I did spend $3,000 to get a car to take us back to San Jose and pay for 2 tickets that were the same day flying to go back to LA that I do not have. I live project to project on a very strict budget. We also had to get COVID tested that same day. It was just a lot of rush charges that I paid to get home. And I'm still feeling the sting of that. But most importantly, I am working on it now. I'm not doing avoidant behaviors. That would have been not going on the trip at all, or since being home and staying in my comfort zone and not leaving. And I've been going for bike rides. I've been meeting up with vaccinated friends in outdoor spaces. I've been going to lunches. I've been walking. I do 20 minutes of yoga every day. I do the breathwork mix that Jared actually produced. I'll link that below. I've been starting this Sam Harris meditation app called Waking Up, which is crazy because I'm not someone who's ever enjoyed meditating and I actually enjoy it. I try to drink something green in the morning that I know will make my guts feel good. And I've already scheduled an appointment with my psychiatrist to go up on my meds back to my normal amount. And I'm still seeing my therapist weekly. I downloaded this great gratitude app called Gratitude, which prompts a question every day, helps me live in the current present moment and not get too inside of my head. I've learned EFT tapping techniques, which I wrote about in my book, but now I have like a mantra that goes with it, which is I am learning and growing to keep myself safe and secure. I am learning and growing to keep myself safe and secure. And then I do different tapping points on my body, and it just helps you to instill the words you're actually saying into your body. I've learned something very important about the cycle of thoughts. There is something that happens when we start to feel a thought. Our brains automatically try to justify why we are feeling that way and why that feeling should stay there, Why should we keep interacting with this thought rather than just letting it flow by? And this can apply for a lot of things when it comes to anxious thoughts. For me, the process looks like a tiny alarm bell goes off, an uncomfortable thought will pop into my head, then my brain will try to back it up with more thoughts about like, yeah, this feeling and thought should exist here. I should feel agoraphobic because I've left my safe space and I've been struggling a lot, so I should be scared. This thought belongs here because what if I have a panic attack right now? I should be prepared. That's happened before. This thought should continue in my brain because I'm someone who ruminates and gets stuck in my head. All of these things trying to justify that feeling and thought. But the truth is that it always comes back to thoughts are just thoughts. They don't need to be feelings, and feelings don't need to be fact. Whether I need to like fully stop that moment and say stop and replace that thought, or give myself a break, or give myself a hug, or do my mantra, or if I even need to say, hey, I need to go home, that's okay, because I am going through it right now. I know I'm not cured or like really even in that much of a better spot than I was in November, but I know the truth that this is not going to last forever. And rather than calling it feeling lost, I'm discovering and exploring. This is a state that I'm in. It's not a constant trait of mine. I am in flux and nothing worth anything comes easy. And of course it's frustrating because I've been going through mental health struggles my whole life. So when something pops up new that I'm like, I didn't know this existed. Of course it's easy to go like, oh gosh, is this gonna be this way forever? But it's about actually taking the time to rewire your brain. And I can say with confidence that even though I might not feel like I'm in a better place since November, I am. I'm still fighting this fight. I am still choosing to do the work. And that's just the truth. I am still in a good place. I'm working. I'm fostering relationships. I'm able to leave the house. So again, I'm gonna put a link below for one of Jared's amazing breath works. They're only 15 minutes. I'm someone who like did not even subscribe to the idea of breath work because I thought it was gonna give me panic attacks. And I tried it before, but this is actually really digestible and I think it's actually good music. And I did sob for like 20 minutes after the first time I did it. I feel like my body just needed that release. It was the day after we came back from Costa Rica and like, oh my gosh. So that's it. That is my truth about agoraphobia right now. And so I'm curious, have any of you ever felt this way or dealt with this or have a loved one that has? What do you find that helps? What tips or tricks can you leave in the comments for others to read? Let's start a thread below. And in the meantime, have a happy new year and I will see you next week.